RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity.
Hello and welcome to the RE Academic Podcast, One Student, One Creativity. I'm your host, Masitoh, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's episode. We'll be talking about a topic that's close to our hearts, empowering English language teaching or ELT through podcasts, innovative approaches for language skills and beyond. For our class teaching material development with the lecturers Dr. Rita Inderawati, M.Pd, and Dr. Eryansyah, M.A., Ph.D. Today, we're going to talk about what makes this book interesting. Podcast has become an incredible tool in education, especially for teaching language skills and fostering creativity. To help us delve deeper into this, I'm joined by my dear friend and co-author Ida Musirini from the Magister of Education program at the University of Sriwijaya. Ida, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Masito. I am excited to be here. Podcasts have been a game changer for us in ELT, and I'm thrilled to share our insight with the audience.
Absolutely. Before we get into the specifics, could you tell us a bit about the book we co-authored, Empowering ELT Through Podcasts, Innovative Approaches for Language Skills and Beyond?
Of course, the book is a collaborative effort between us, myself, you, Wineka Satya, and Omi Abria, under the mentorship of Dr. Rita Inderawati, M.Pd, and Dr. Eryansyah, M.A., Ph.D. It explores how podcasts can enhance the teaching and learning of English, particularly by focusing on listening skills, cultural understanding, and fostering students' creativity. We wanted to create a resource that blends theory and practice, offering teachers practical strategies to implement podcasts in their classrooms.
That's amazing, Ida. Let's talk about the core concept. Why do you think podcasts are such a powerful medium for language teaching?
Okay, that's a great question, Masito. Podcasts are versatile and accessible. They expose students to authentic language use, diverse accents, and real-world topics. Unlike traditional listening materials, podcasts are dynamic and can be tailored to students' interests. For instance, a podcast episode about global festivals can teach listening while introducing cultural awareness. This multidimensional approach makes learning more engaging and meaningful.
Well, that's so true. Speaking of engagement, one challenge teacher often faces keeping students motivated during listening activities. How can podcasts help with that?
Hmm. Podcasts naturally pique curiosity. When students listen to interesting stories or interviews, they're more likely to stay focused. Teachers can select topics that align with students' interests, like technology, sports, or even social media trends. Also, podcasts allow for creative assignments. For example, students can create their own podcast as a project. This helps develop not just a listening skill, but also speaking, critical thinking, and collaboration.
That's a fantastic idea, Ida. Creating podcasts as a classroom activity really aligns with the forces of 21st century learning, such as critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity, right?
Yeah, exactly, Masito. And it's not just about language. Podcasts can help students build confidence and learn how to express themselves effectively. Plus, the process of scripting, recording, and editing introduce them to digital literacy skills.
Okay, yes, that's such an important point too. Now, let's dive into the how-to part. Could you share a few practical tips for teachers who want to start using podcasts in their classrooms?
Sure. Okay, here are three simple steps. Number one, start small. Begin with short, simple episodes that match your students' language proficiency. There are many free educational podcasts available online. And number two, interactive listening. Design activities around the podcast like predicting content, answering questions, or summarizing key points. And the last would be students-led projects. Encourage students to create their own podcast episodes. This can be a collaborative project where they write scripts, record, and even edit.
Those are wonderful tips, Ida. One last question before we wrap up. What's your advice
Mhm.
for teachers who feel hesitant about using technology like podcasts?
Okay, don't worry about being perfect with technology. Start with the basic and learn along the way. Also, involve your students. They often enjoy experimenting with new tools and can help troubleshoot. Most importantly, remember that podcasts are a medium, not a goal. Focus on how they can enrich your teaching and your students' learning experience.
Wow, wise words, Ida. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you, Masito. It's been an honor to discuss this exciting topic with you.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Remember, education is a journey, and tools like podcasts can make it even more exciting. Until next time, keep exploring, creating, and inspiring. Bye.
Bye.
RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity.